Welcome to the center of the universe and the home of the 18-time Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts. This is the X's and Argos podcast with Ben Grant and JB.
Welcome to the X's and Argos pregame walkthrough, brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing. Ben Grant, joined as always by JB, and we are here to get you set for the Labor Day Classic, Toronto at Hamilton. And before we get into anything else, I just want to say it's felt like a bye week this week with basically a week with no Argos practice. It's been an unusual one, and we've got a surprising amount to talk about this week. Let me go through the lineup for you. We've got PFF honoring a bunch of Argos from last week's game, although no one on the offensive side of the ball. Kenneth George has signed the former Hamilton Tiger Cat. That's an interesting and maybe timely signing. Qwan'tez Stiggers has made the New York Jets 53-man roster. Rasheed Bailey signed in Ottawa. Aneem Dankwa, the Toronto Argonauts draft pick from this year, was cut by the Philadelphia Eagles, and we'll sort of update you on some of the other Argos in waiting down in the NFL. And is it finally time for the CFL to stop complaining about the Toronto Argonauts and them being over the cap after the BC Lions have not only brought in Nathan Rourke, but now have signed Mathieu Betts to a huge deal? I think maybe the focus on salary cap will go away from Toronto finally. And last but not least, we'll talk about some NFL pickups and some possibilities there, including one that I thought was really interesting that Mike Mitchell brought up with me. So we'll get into that, plus pick six, game preview, injury report, OCDC, one thing, predictions, put me down for 20, and CFL picks. All that more coming up on this episode of the X's and Argos podcast. JB, I'm down here in the States right now all week, and one of the things that I think I miss the most is Something in the Water beer, because American beer is not the same as Canadian, and it's certainly not the same as Something in the Water, and they could use a Something in the Water location down here. Of course, you've got one in Toronto at Liberty Village, one in Kingston as well, and if you haven't been down to Something in the Water yet, you got to see what I'm currently missing. Something in the Water is located in the heart of Liberty Village. It's only steps from Lamport Stadium, where the Argos practice, only steps from BMO Field too. The next time the Argos have a home game, end of September, hosting Hamilton, you got to make sure you get out to Something in the Water. They're planning something big for that. They've got a great selection of food. They've got wonderful beer as well. So many to choose from, including Longboat Pale Ale, the beer that is made for fans of the Double Blue. It's made for you. So check it out, Something in the Water Brewing. Let's get into it, JB. So, PFF this week honoring Ralph Holley, Benji Franklin, Royce Metier, and Lirim Haralahu. I want to focus on Benji Franklin. Obviously had the huge game to pick. We gave him his flowers last week post game. Royce Metier, I think all season has been the best safety in the league. Ralph Holley, I think we probably don't talk enough about. So he was named the run defender of the week for the previous 2 weeks. And then this week, PFF honored him as basically the pass rusher of the week. He had that huge sack of Trevor Harris, like at the 1 inch line, essentially, that set up what would end up being the winner for the Argos. And his pass rush win rate from last week was 20%, which is massive. He's like 14.8 on the season. That has him tied for 7th best in the league. And that's as a pass rusher. And that's not really what he was brought in for. And you look at the fact that he's the third guy. Like, it was supposed to be Jared Brinkman. He got injured. They brought in Jordan Williams. He got injured. And they brought in Ralph Holley, and he's been spectacular. JB, what do they do when these guys start getting healthy? Like, I know Jordan Williams back to practicing now. Has Ralph Holley put himself in a position where you can't take him out of the lineup?
I mean, I think he's played really well. I wouldn't go so far as to say that. Yeah, I mean, they have an abundance. I mean, to be honest, it wouldn't surprise me if a trade came. I think that's more than, say, a release. I think that it's clearly an area where they have a lot of depth. And I don't think you're going to be able to hide anybody on a practice squad of that talent. So, to me, it feels like potentially a trade could come.
Yeah, I wonder about that, especially by the time, and we have to check in on the mysterious CFL trade deadline and the least publicized trade deadline in professional sports, probably. But yeah, we'll have to see when that is. We haven't addressed when that is, but it hasn't come by yet. But yeah, that's an interesting thing. I think the Argos, and just knowing how how injuries go on the defensive line. I think they would rather know that they've got 3 guys there that they feel good about, because I really like Jordan Williams. I thought he was playing really well off the bat, and Brinkman and Williams I thought were a really nice one too. Remember that it was the play of these guys that led to them moving on from a couple of guys like Sean Oakman, who was in the plans at the beginning of the season, and Deontay Knight, for example, who was also part of this interior defensive line plan. But they've been so blessed with talent, and Serezna obviously playing well. And I do wonder if the play of Ralph Holley has maybe been impacted positively by Orimolade and Serezna being on that same line. Like, I don't want to take anything away from Ralph Holley, because he looks really good to me on film, and it looks good live, looks good in every possible way. But I do wonder, because we've seen that happen before, where there's a star or 2 on the line, and suddenly someone else's stats are a little bit better because of that. Brandon Barlow, a little bit like that last year, for example. Again, I don't want to take anything away from him either, but I think when you're playing next to studs on the D line, it does help, certainly. JB, let's get into the Kenneth George signing. So that happened earlier this week. I know you got a chance to watch him at practice today. Before we get into what he looked like on the practice field, do you wonder about the timing when you see a move like this, knowing that Toronto's going into play Hamilton? They've got a new defensive coordinator or a defensive assistant head, whatever his title is, and Chris Jones. Do you think there might be some of that going into a move like signing Kenneth George Jr., where you're wanting to pick his brain a little bit?
I think it's, I mean, I don't want to suggest that players are not, players are just signed for ulterior reasons, but it happens enough that I do think it's more a mind game with Hamilton than it is, finding a resource of Hamilton information. I mean, I don't think they would have signed him had they not felt he could add something, or could potentially be in the mix at defensive back depth. But I do think they enjoy the idea of Hamilton wondering how many of their signals, how many of their plays, how much he is able to share with the Argos. I don't think he is, but I think it is amusing to at least make Hamilton think about it for 4 days.
Yeah, I think there is something to that. But Kenneth George Jr., I think, is a good player. I think they bring him in regardless. Even if they were done playing Hamilton for the season, I don't think the timing of this would have adjusted. But I think there's probably a little bit of extra enjoyment from the front office knowing that it's going to do exactly that, because it's annoying on the other side of it. And let's not forget where a lot of these Argos ended up, including a guy that was taken off the practice squad in Deontay Knight. So there's a bit of, not that there needs to be another level of this rivalry down the QEW, but I'm sure there was a little bit of enjoyment on the Argos' part, and probably a bit of cursing on the Hamilton Tiger Cats' part. But let's talk about Kenneth George as a player, because he is a player. And in my view, he hasn't looked as good this season because they've been playing him at halfback largely. And I'm just not sure he is a halfback. And I know it's his second year in the league now, and sometimes you want to push those guys from outside in. That's sort of the goal of it. But he looked good at corner at Tennessee. He looked good playing at corner last year for the Tiger Cats. And maybe he's just not a guy that moves inside that well. So I don't know. For me, I would love to see him at least starting out as a backup on the corner spot. I don't know if he makes the dress roster this week, or how that's going to work. Wearing number 33, I'm pretty excited about seeing him out there, though, because I do like him when he's got that corner responsibility. How did he look in practice today?
He rotated through. They were moving guys in and out pretty regularly, giving everybody reps. So he was with the twos, and he looked fast. I mean, that's the takeaway. I think he's clearly a corner. He's not a really big guy, but he is able, in terms of man, I think he fits the scheme really nicely. Like he can carry a player down the field stride for stride. So I think from a strategy fit, if they want to play more man, I think he has the potential to be really useful for them.
Yeah, and I think I can totally see him fitting into what Coach Fields does in and just how it's different from last year. Like, because I think if he was available last year with Coach Mace in charge of the defense, I'm not sure he ends up in Toronto. It's just a different style. And now them going to more of that, the speed on the outside, guys that can lock into man coverage, guys that can play zone as well. You have to in the CFL. But I do think Kenneth George Jr. maybe fits Toronto's scheme a little bit better than perhaps what's being run in Hamilton. And I certainly think he's better on the outside. So hopefully that's where Toronto keeps him. But yeah, I think that's a nice pickup. And if you can get into the heads of the Hamilton Tiger Cats while you're at it, then yeah, all the power to you. Qwan'tez Stiggers has made the 53-man roster on the New York Jets. Any surprise from you on this?
No, I mean, just from a I think a logistical point of view, it would be very unusual for a player chosen in the in the first 5 rounds to not make the squad the year they're drafted. I think in general they're kind of given 2 years to show something, but also not a surprise because I think we both feel that he is incredibly talented, just an absolute savant at learning defenses, able to soak up the information and process it incredibly well. I'm sure the coaches have fallen in love with him. He remains, I think, a little bit of a tweener, which was our thought when we saw him for American football in terms of can he play nickel? He's built like a safety. But I think if the scheme uses him correctly, he can be both a special teams monster and an incredibly useful extra tackler in the box. Like you definitely want him in the box, who if needed, won't look out of place if he has to do some coverage.
Yeah, I think he's going to be the first corner off the bench. I think he's going to get some nickel opportunities. I think he'll be backing up on the corner as well. But I think I could completely see him working his way into the starting lineup, especially if there's an injury to one of those starters in New York. I could see him fitting in there because from everything I gather, the coaching staff loves him. And we said from the beginning, like I do want to give us credit for first day of training camp saying this is an NFL guy. Like we're both like this guy's in the wrong league here, and it's come to fruition. We get a lot of stuff wrong, as evidenced by our Put Me Down for 20 segment coming up later in the podcast. We're wrong a lot, but this is one of the rare times that we get to celebrate being right about something, JB. I looked up because just about everything I know about scouting, I learned from a guy named Dan Hatman, who's a pro scout. He was with the Eagles, the Giants, and the New York Jets. And I sent him an email July 13th last year telling him about Qwan'tez Stiggers, and I sent him a report on what Stiggers was doing here. And through that network, I guess that was passed along, and I started getting some questions about him too. And for a guy like Stiggers to end up in New York, I don't think I had anything to do with it in the end, because I think once he started playing really well here and through August and September, he started getting everyone's attention. But it just sort of shows how early we were on Stiggers. And I think anyone around the Argos organization, anyone that got to see him on a daily basis, realized very quickly, like, yeah, this kid's special, because knowing how young he was too really showed something. So I'm really happy for him. I'm considering getting a Qwan'tez Stiggers jersey. As I've said many times, it's the only Jet jersey worth purchasing, I think, at this point.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, it's by all accounts, he's a terrific kid, and I think it's great for players to show the league that being an all-star and being a standout player in the CFL does translate to you being able to be elite in the NFL.
Rasheed Bailey has signed in Ottawa, and I want to talk about a few things about this, because remember when Rasheed Bailey was released, he was Toronto's leading receiver at that point, and everybody's strong. A lot of people were horrified. I got a lot of DMs on social media, a lot of tweets with questions as to why would Toronto do this? He's immediately going to get picked up. This is a big mistake. He sat for a month before signing in Ottawa. It was over a month, and not a single team in the CFL signed him. Now, again, I don't want to take anything away from Rasheed Bailey either. That's not the goal of this, but clearly this wasn't just Toronto feeling like that he maybe didn't have a place here when you looked at how well Mackay Polk was playing and the fact that you had Tavares Daniels, Demonte Coxey in there as well, and you weren't going to put Rasheed Bailey in the practice roster. Every other team in the CFL had an opportunity over this past month, and it took Ottawa and injuries, and Jalen Acklin last week with that horrific-looking injury for Rasheed Bailey to end up signing somewhere. And so I think that maybe shows that Toronto front office, you have to trust that they know what they're doing. There is an understanding of skill level with all of the players that they sign and the players that they let go and move on from. And Rasheed Bailey, while I think he certainly fit into this offense really nicely, I just don't know that. I still think to this point it was the correct move to choose essentially Mackay Polk over Rasheed Bailey.
Well, I think it definitely was. It's always going to. I think it's always going to, unless people really feel a mistake was made, it's always going to take longer for an American player to get picked up because it's just naturally harder to pick up an American in terms of the ratio. So I think there's always going to be more conversation before you pick an American up, and Polk I think is the future for sure. Rasheed Bailey. I think was a very capable wide receiver, but doesn't. We know what he is and what he's able to do, and I think Polk has a ceiling that should really excite Argos fans. I think if they can find a way to make a connection between Kelly and Polk, in the way that Gittins and McLeod were able to do, I think there's an incredible opportunity there.
And I think last week too, because I got comments from people saying they should have let go Coxey instead, or they should have let Tavares go instead. Like this last week showed you why you don't let go of Coxey and Tavares. No, and it's just, it was such a ludicrous comment for anyone to make.
No, and Coxey already has that chemistry with Kelly. Clearly those two are often on the same page, and I would go so far as to say that Coxey is probably his favorite receiver. He definitely likes throwing to Coxey, and just as an aside, I thought one of the best moments of practice today was just Coxey, as he was getting ready to run some wide receiver drills, dapped up a kid who was walking along the sideline, and probably made that kid's week. Little stuff like that, I think, just goes to the kind of person he is, and why the Argos would want to hold on to him.
Yeah, and his numbers, if nothing else. And Tavares, if you saw the third episode of Pulled Together, which came out today or yesterday, you just watch that for an example of, if you're not sure why they love Tavares Daniels so much. Even when it's not stuff that's on the field, you look at the leadership that he's shown. And there was clips of him, he's hanging out with all his receivers at his place. He's brought them all over. He's got Mackay in there as well, and talking about trying to show him the way and help him along in his process. And Mackay echoed that sentiment, sort of referred to him as the father of the group. And the leadership that you can see in Tavares and what he's done with some of these younger receivers. I don't want to spoil too much, because if you haven't seen the episode, you should watch it. But I did get a kick out of him briefly thinking that Tommy Neild was from Guelph and not McMaster. Tommy was pretty quick to correct him to say McMaster and not Guelph. But with OUA underway, you could bet that Tommy Neild took some offense to Tavares getting that school wrong. But yeah, he was there with all the guys, and Ceresna was at his place too. Just really fun footage, and you get a sense of who Tavares is as a person and why he's so special in that Argos locker room too. So NFL cuts have come and gone for the most part, and some guys that Toronto has the rights to have found themselves without teams. And the most recent one being Anim Dankwa, who was a 6th-round pick of the Argos this year. And I want to go into that and when he might be expected, because as soon as one of these guys gets cut, I get asked right away, And then I get asked about everyone else that we're still waiting on going back several years too. So let's start with Dankwa for the 2024 sixth round pick. So he was a 6'8", 353 lineman that both you and I had a chance to coach against JB. He did not make either of our days, and is just a massive individual. He was the largest offensive lineman at the NFL Combine this year, and was paid, I think, either, if not the most, it was one of the highest paying UDFA contracts this season to go to Philly. And he ended up getting put on waivers or getting cut at the end, this sort of last group of cuts. He has not signed anywhere as of this recording. This is not a guy, because of that UDFA contract, because of the fact that he was a guy that was at the Combine. He wasn't just, Johnny Nobody out of nowhere and, a lot of guys have him on their radar. I do not think this is something that will result in him coming up to the CFL this season. And I've been wrong a lot. I didn't think Nathan Rourke was coming this year. I didn't think Matthew Betts was coming this year. Both guys were like on a flight within an hour of being let go. I don't see it with Dankwa, so I don't think he's going to be coming up this year. Usually, you've seen this a number of times too, where, yeah, sure, a guy doesn't necessarily make the roster right away, but when you're that sought after, you wait around, and you're going to end up on someone's practice roster most likely at some point over the next month or so.
His measurables are too good to give up on the NFL. You're playing for a practice squad, you're going to make in the range of $800,000. There's no chance that somebody doesn't take a chance with that frame and believe that they can coach them up. So I would think at least this year he will sign, and probably 2 years of that, because if you have an elite measurable, you're going to be, you're going to kick around for 3 or 4 years on the practice squads.
And if you want evidence of that, just look to Sage Dockstader, who we're still waiting on from the 2021 draft, a guy that's still not on an NFL team, but he's still looking for that opportunity. He was with the New Orleans Saints, and Dockstader was a second-round pick in 2021 as well, but he got a little look with the Saints, ended up starting 5 games with, I think it was Houston, with the XFL in 23. Yeah, that's right. And then signed this year with the St. Louis Battlehawks. Ended up going on injured reserve. And you look at that, and the CFL is obviously a more lucrative option for him, but clearly his sights are still set. He hasn't given up on that NFL dream. And then the other couple guys that we can update you on, who I also immediately got questions about, Luigi Villain, out of Michigan, played 3 games for the Vikings in 2022, signed with the Panthers. I think he was pulled off the Vikings practice roster in 2023 and actually signed with the Panthers. He was waived by the Panthers on Tuesday, and so he's sitting out there. But again, I think a guy that has actual game experience in the NFL, he's going to wait around. I don't think I would expect to see Villain up here in Toronto anytime soon. Again, I'm wrong a lot. I'm hoping I'm wrong. I like Villain as a player. I think he's a really intriguing guy, so I'd love to see him up here. I don't see that happening anytime soon. And Jared Wayne is the last one. He was the Argos' first pick from last year's draft, drafted in the second round. He spent 2023 on the Houston practice squad, was waived by Houston back in July of this year, still not signed anywhere. But again, I think a guy like that is going to wait through the fall, wait through some injuries. He obviously built up some relationships there, but I don't expect to see him quite there yet. But I always get asked about all those guys, so I just wanted to put all that down here there. That is your information about what I know, which is very little, but I don't think any of those guys are coming up for this fall in Toronto.
No, and I do think it's always important for people to be reminded of the incredible gap in financial, remuneration between being a practice squad player and playing in the CFL. It is, NFL dream aside, it is, you're talking about players who are making close to $1 million being on a practice squad.
And we're not talking, and these guys aren't quarterbacks, right? Like, it's different maybe if you're Nathan Rourke, where that was the only guy where there was some discussion because he ended up coming up here, and this is going to sort of tease into our next segment too, but he came up here for huge money, which was still about the same as NFL practice roster, but that's what you have to be. And if you're a positional player instead, and you're coming in from the NFL, you are certainly financially better off on a practice squad in the NFL than you are even as a starter in the CFL in all positions except for quarterback. So, JB, is it time for everyone to, and this doesn't even make sense because it hasn't even been an issue over the last couple of years, but everyone, it just seems like anytime Toronto signs anybody, I always get salary cap doesn't matter in Toronto because of the one time they went over the salary cap, and it wasn't even by a lot either. And so now I think people are starting to instead target the BC Lions, who have made a couple of huge moves over the last few weeks. They signed Nathan Rourke to like $1 billion over the next few years. Obviously, it's not that much, but it's a massive contract, highest paid player in the CFL. And then Matthew Betts, who you wonder how they could find a way to make room for him. Farhan Ladji was reporting that Betts was receiving $145,000 for the remaining 7 games. That's a massive contract, and you can only imagine what he'll demand going forward. Now, again, I'm not criticizing BC. I actually love it. With the salary cap structure of the CFL, it's not really a cap. It's more a luxury tax like. So if you're over the cap, there's more to it than this, but basically you pay whatever you are over the cap, you now pay as like a tax, as a luxury tax. Now, if you get over 100,000, then it starts getting a little dicey because you can actually lose draft picks, etc. But I don't see, for a team like BC, they're hosting the Grey Cup. They've lost like 5 games in a row now. They needed something. And so, full credit to Doman for going out and saying, you know what, this probably, and I don't know their financials, maybe it doesn't put them over the cap, but I find that hard to believe. I would imagine it does, but I'm totally fine with that. I think teams should do that when they see something, they feel there's an opportunity there. Yeah, why not? As long as you're not over that 100,000 mark, and maybe he doesn't even care about that. I don't know. So I like the move, but I think this will finally take some of the abuse that our Argos and Argos fans have received over the last few years in cap-related discussions.
Well, I would assume this money is the promotional money, right?
Well, I don't know how that breaks down too, but you're right in that makes the cap sort of obsolete anyway, and that's something that I know the owners are going to want to try and fix that loophole, because as it stands now, there's no cap to marketing money, as I understand it. You can sign players to all you want in terms of marketing money. And I know Nathan Rourke's contract had a lot of marketing money tied into it. Chad Kelly's contract did as well. I don't know the structure of the contract that Matthew Betts signed, but that is a way that you can certainly, it can look like you're signing guys to money that would put you well over the cap, but not necessarily the case if a lot of that is marketing money. So again, I don't know how that breaks down, but it's a weird gray area. Again, I encourage teams to use that loophole because why not? It's there and it's great for the players. Players love it, but I think. Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
Well, I just think they're going to want to close that at some point. There needs to be some guidelines surrounding that, because right now it's just too open, too vague, I think, even though I love it.
Right. They probably would want to look at potentially some version of the MLS, with the designated player who lives outside of the cap, potentially. They might want to look at some version of that. I agree with you. They've created this sort of loophole like American college football, where you can pay them to do promotional work, except they don't even need to do the promotional work. So it is very weird because clearly, even in American college football, you have to sort of lie about the promotional work they're doing to receive the promotional money. And here they're just flat out giving you this money, with no cap. So I can't imagine. Certainly if Toronto had done it, the people would go mad. But I can't imagine that that's going to continue in the next collective bargaining agreement.
Well, my understanding is that the marketing money is audited, but again, I just don't know. Again, what does that look like? What does that mean? Like, if you feel that
that's going to is he going to like wear the mascot for an hour or something?
Well, I think it's opportunities like running camps and visiting different places or going to schools and stuff like that. Like that's sort of how I think of it, and I think that's largely how it's being used. But who determines the value that you place on any particular player? Is everyone the same, or can you say, well, no, everyone loves him, that's worth $1 million a visit? I don't know. And again, it's a
Yeah.
topic I don't know enough about probably, but my understanding is that it is audited to some degree. I just think it probably needs to be a bit more clear going forward. Now, the thing I like about it though, and I think the reason the CFL shouldn't get rid of it, but needs to organize it maybe, is that I think it's good for the league. I think the players like it. It's good for the league and good for the promotion of the individual teams to have players encouraged to go out into the community. They do pretty well anyway. Like the CFL is great with that. The players are so accessible. You can always find them. You can always get an autograph. That's one of the best things about the CFL. But I think the marketing side of that is good. And so you don't want to take that away from teams and say, no, stop doing that. But at the same time, it's just a bit strange right now. So they need to find a middle ground that everybody is happy with. Because I can't imagine the owners, even though they're the ones doing it, I can't imagine they're happy with this scenario. And I'm sure the players are thrilled about it. So let's talk about some potential NFL pickups. And the way I see this Argos roster, we talked about this in our postgame pod last time. The only hole the Argos have, in my mind, is short yardage quarterback. I like Cameron Dukes as a backup quarterback. I like the rest of the team as they're composed. I don't think there are a lot of holes there when everyone's healthy. We saw against Saskatchewan that there was a hole in the roster. They do not have that short yardage specialist the way that other teams do, the Tommy Stevens of the world that can go in there and almost guarantee that they're going to get that yard. The Chris Strevelers, the Dakota Prukops. Every team seems to have a guy. And sometimes it's a fullback, like the case with Hamilton. But Toronto doesn't necessarily have that guy. Mike Mitchell, who I want to shout out here, I consider Mike a friend, and he knows as much about the Argos as anybody. He highlighted Tyree Jackson as an interesting prospect to look at. And I went back and kind of looked at some of his stuff. I didn't realize how long he's been out of college, first of all, because I remember him with the Buffalo Bulls. And he's just a massive guy. He's 6'7", 249. He played a preseason with the Bills back in 2019, I didn't realize it was that long ago. He got converted to a tight end, played for Philadelphia, then the New York Giants, and he is currently without a team. That's a guy, I love that kind of thinking though, and a guy that's 6'7", 250, that's your Tommy Stevens, a guy like that can come in. He's played quarterback before. He's got that sort of tight end experience as well, which I don't think hurts you. If it's not him, maybe it's not Tyree Jackson, surely there's got to be someone like that, a guy who has played quarterback, who has that kind of size, who can plow forward to get you those automatic yards, or what should be automatic yards were instead impossible yards that had the Toronto Argonauts passing from the 1 yard line and doing all sorts of strange stuff. So, JB, would you be all for finding a guy like Tyree Jackson to play that sneak spot?
Yeah, or I mean, I guess potentially like an American fullback could be useful. They need a hammer. It is a problem on the team. It is a shortcoming of the team, and you absolutely cannot have another potential fiasco like they did against Saskatchewan. I mean that you just can't give. You have to score touchdowns on the 1 yard line. I don't know how much stronger I can. You have to. You can't. You cannot have those. Never mind not turning into field goals, turning into nothing. You need to be able to convert. It's like having a field goal kicker who misses 50% of the time. Like, you can miss occasionally, but you can't go into the playoffs with a field goal kicker who misses, half or more than half of the time. And I think it's that level of significance in terms of a hole in the roster that they need to fix. And they needed to fix last year. But I think once again, it has to be done, and whether they make a trade for it or find somebody from an NFL roster. Yeah, I'm hoping that happens this week.
I feel pretty strongly that it should be someone with quarterback experience, even if it's a guy that's a fullback, someone that at least in high school, somewhere along the line, took snaps from under center, because it's not something that everyone can do. And again, tip of the hat to Litre in Hamilton, who's a fullback, being able to do that. Not everyone can go and do that. And what you don't want is this turning into fumbled snaps. You don't want to bring a guy in who looks the part and can plow forward for that first down, but he fumbles every other snap. That's worse. I'd rather at least hang on to the football in that scenario. So I think you got to be very careful with who you bring in. And so for me, former quarterback, if you can find a guy with that kind of size, he doesn't have to still be playing quarterback, but someone like Jackson, I think fits in this case. And this ties into our next segment, JB. We've got all sorts of natural transitions here today. Pick six next up for us, and we got a question from Chris W. that is along the same lines here. And the Pick Six brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing. This is something that we run every single week. If you haven't got on board so far this year, check out our Twitter account at X's and Argos. Every week we post asking for your questions. And if we pick your question, you win a 6-pack of delicious beer from Something in the Water Brewing. And so our winner this week, Chris W., you've won that 6-pack from Something in the Water Brewing. Go and get yourself some Longboat to enjoy while watching the next couple Argos games. And his question, JB, I'm going to turn it to you first and I'll follow up, is why does the CFL need a short yardage quarterback to go for it on 2nd and 1 or 3rd and 1 plays? You never see a switch up at QB for short yardage in the NFL or the XFL. So why are things different in the CFL?
Yeah, good question. I think primarily the issue is the 1 yard gap that the defensive line has between it and the offensive line. And what you're looking at there is a lot more contact. The CFL offense knows to snap count, so they're able to basically move and if you only need a yard, essentially you should be able to get it because you can get into that area before the defense is able to react. So you're more likely to convert it. But I think you're also looking at the physicality of what's going to happen. I think that there's a lot more contact in the CFL version. So I think that you're not looking for your quarterback to take. I mean, you saw poor Dukes get lined up as he scraped down the line. You're not looking for your $20 million quarterback to take on a linebacker. So I think it's kind of a mixture of things. It is kind of an unusual thing. I think also, teams who are successful in like any league, it's a copycat league. And teams have seen this and seen that if you have somebody who feels comfortable in that kind of traffic jam, not every quarterback feels comfortable or is a natural at getting down or following a lead. And so if you're able to find that, but I think the primary reason is simply the extra yard between the two lines.
And I would argue that extra yard makes it the correct quarterback sneak, a correct thing to do. Like on 3rd and 1, I think you should quarterback sneak. I don't like it. I hate quarterback sneaks. I find them really boring. I actually wish they weren't allowed. I wish you could find something else. I would gladly take that away, the ability to quarterback sneak, but that's not going to happen. So that being said, if I were coaching, I would call a quarterback sneak on every second one. Maybe not every second one, every 3rd and 1 certainly, because I think it's the easiest way to get a yard. I don't feel that in the NFL. 4th and 1 in the NFL, there's no chance I'm quarterback sneaking with a full yard to go in the NFL because, like you said, that space off the ball, it makes such a difference. In the NFL, they're right there. So you actually have to push these giant guys backwards a yard and have your quarterback make that ground up too, starting from a yard further back.
Seemingly so does Toronto.
Yeah, well, I know, but it shouldn't be the case, and that's why I'm making this appeal to get a player like that, because it should be an automatic. You should always be able to get that yard. And I know it's not as easy as that. Like I've coached for a long time. I've had a lot of quarterbacks try and sneak and not be able to get the yard, but you should always be able to. If you don't, it means you, as your team, your offense, mess something up, because you have that advantage. You know the count and you already have a yard of space. You've got to be able to get that yard. And that's not the same in the XFL. It's not the same in the NFL. You'll see them going for it in 4th and inches and run a sneak, but 4th and 1, you just don't see quarterback sneaks on 4th and 1. It's too far. And in the CFL, it's not. It's an automatic. But in the CFL, especially when you're talking about end goal situations, they always bring it back to the 1. So you're never in a situation where you only need a couple inches end goal. That just doesn't happen in the CFL. It gets put back to the 1 yard line every time, and the defense lines up on the end zone stripe a yard away. All right, let's get into our game preview. Labor Day, JB. Labor Day hasn't been as bad for the Argonauts lately. They're 2-1 in the Coach Dinwiddie era. Coach Dinwiddie started off with a loss on Labor Day, 32-19, followed it up with a big win, 28-8 in 2022, and then last year a 41-28 demolishing of the Hamilton Tiger Cats. So it doesn't make people cringe the way it did a few years ago, where it felt like every single season Hamilton was just unloading on the Argos. Even when they didn't have a good team, it seemed like they found something on Labor Day. There's still a little bit of that. There's still that little, it's hard to shake it off completely, but I do feel like the Argos have to be a more confident group than they were, 5 or 6 years ago heading into this one.
Yeah, I think definitely. I think the aura of Hamilton is not what it used to be. I know Hamilton won last game, but I don't think that is an issue for the coaching staff, for the players. I think they feel very comfortable winning in Hamilton. So I mean that's going for them for sure. But it's always dangerous when you're playing a team that essentially, this is Hamilton's Super Bowl. Like, Hamilton is not going to the playoffs. Winning on Labor Day is going to be their Grey Cup, their championship moment of the season. And it's very hard to match that level of intensity when it's just not the same for you. So that does worry me a little.
And they're already 4 games back of the Argos, who are in 3rd in the East. And so this would put them back 5 games.
The season's over.
Yeah, this is it. Like it's probably over anyway. But if they lose on Labor Day, it's over. It's 100% over, because you are at that point. Actually, even now, just looking at the standings in front of me, they're mathematically closer to being the first place team in the West Division than they are being the 3rd place team in the East. Just how it is, because Saskatchewan's leading the West still with 5 wins. Toronto's got 6 in 3rd place in the East, so that's kind of funny. This is one of those years where I think Hamilton wished maybe they were in the West and they might still be in this thing. But yeah, the East is running away without the Tiger Cats. So, but like I said, you're going to get everything, because this is it. There is no tomorrow for Hamilton in this game. But Toronto's thinking about this the same way. They keep somehow having to sit and watch Ottawa win game after game in inexplicable fashion, and they did it again last week, and they can't seem to catch the Red Blacks. Now they've got games coming up finally against Ottawa soon, but yeah, those can't come soon enough right now, because I think they got to be just as tired as you and I probably are, who keep picking against the Red Blacks and losing every single week. So this is a big game for Toronto too. They can't afford to, and they don't want to let Hamilton back in, but they can't afford to let the Red Blacks and the Alouettes get further and further away.
No, and Toronto. I mean, I'm sure it bugs Toronto what happened last time, and those are all Toronto guys, and I'm sure that has been mentioned in group chats and variety of other ways of communicating with each other. So I do think Toronto is going to be up for the game. I mean, based on the energy level of practice today, Toronto looks very excited to participate in this game.
Yeah, I'm sure they are, because all those former Toronto guys had like the game of their season so far. Everyone, it felt like on the defense played really well. All those former Argos, and Hamilton's maybe going to be without one this week, and we'll transition into the injury report. The one that stands out for me on this injury list is Jamal Peters, who did not practice today with a hamstring injury. If he can't go, that's a big deal. That's going to factor into my OCDC, but I think that's generally a big deal. A guy that is going to get up for playing the Argos. And if Peters can't go, that will change things a lot for Hamilton. James Butler on there was able to practice full today. He had an illness, but he's sort of been a healthy scratch. That's been a weird one. And I know, I actually like the running back situation, but Butler, you're paying all this money to, I think has to be on the field. And that's going to factor into my OCDC this week as well. So that's basically how Hamilton stands. For Toronto, good news in that John Haggerty was out practicing full. He had the back injury. Remember that he got in the pregame warm-up last week against Saskatchewan. He was out there in the pregame warm-up, just tweaked something in his back, had to sit, couldn't even hold. He actually technically dressed for the Argos, so he wasn't a scratch, but and he had to because they needed a global player on the field. But good to see him practice full today. Tommy Niels with the hand injury. He's been practicing full for a couple of weeks now. He should be expected back soon. And Jordan Williams, who we talked about earlier in the show, great to see him back at practice and going full with that ankle injury. So that's all good news for Toronto. They still have a dozen guys on the 6 game. And so it's not like everyone's healthy. Those guys don't appear if they're not practicing. But to have those 3 guys practicing full, I thought was a real positive sign. It's now time for OCDC. JB, for OCDC, I'll start things off first this week. We'll look at the Hamilton Tiger Cats. I will be the offensive coordinator for the Tiger Cats. You will be the defensive coordinator. Offense first. Here's my plan. First of all, you start James Butler at running back. He's got to be your running back against Toronto this week. And it's not so much to run. I wouldn't run very much at all. Toronto's shown that they can shut down the run. They've shown it against just about every team in the league, Hamilton included. Instead, I'm going to use him out of the backfield. I'm going to throw to him a lot on the outside, running swing routes, running flat routes. But I also like delayed running back screens, like middle screens. I let the Argos linebackers fan out. They don't have Wyndham McManus probably in there yet. And so without McManus to sniff out those screens, really test the other guys, test Jonathan Jones and Sopik out there and see how they respond to it. Middle screens, you can run the running back screens anywhere, but I like those long delay screens where you've got the defensive line thinking they're about to get a sack, and then Bo Levi Mitchell just pops it over top to James Butler, who's great as a receiver and in space. The other thing I would use is Tim White on receiver screens to the outside, and that's going to set up some of the deep stuff too. Get the ball into Tim White's hands. It doesn't have to be deep downfield, and I suggest that it actually isn't deep downfield. I think you want to try and pull those corners up, and now you can start taking shots with your other guys, whether it's on a double move or whether it's on a pump fake to Tim White and then something else over top, or even just that quick out route that you stare down and maybe get the corner to freeze his feet for a brief second. So that is my plan for the Hamilton Tiger Cats on offense. JB, what are you doing for Hamilton's D?
Well, it's a completely different animal this time, of course, with Chad Kelly in. I think that if you look at the Saskatchewan game, I don't think Chad played particularly well, and they were still able to move the ball relatively smoothly. If I'm Hamilton, I think your only hope here is to try and get Chad frustrated. He obviously has been gone for a long time. He wants to contribute. He wants to, I think he's probably more likely to pull the trigger than even he was last year. So from that point of view, I think that you've got to play at least 4 people deep, like 3, 4 all the time. He's looking to go down the field. I think you have to crowd the seams, give him the underneath, let him nickel and dime his way down the field, and basically dare him to throw into double coverage, which he will do. I mean, he gets frustrated. He wants to go down the field. That's what makes him so good. But I think if you're Hamilton, you are inviting him to go downfield as much as possible. And that's definitely how I would play it. Is I think you can live with the interceptions. If you can match up interceptions with Chad's ability to score touchdowns, you're probably in a better chance to win. So I'm not that worried about the run. I'm not worried about the run in the red zone. Toronto hasn't shown really any facility to as we've talked about ad nauseum, to control the line of scrimmage. So for me, you just have to control the big plays. You just can't allow the 40-yard coaxy post or going on the skinny post to Tavares and that kind of stuff. You really have to crack down on that, give him the underneath stuff, and see if he gets bored with it.
And if we switch over to the good guys, I'll go off of some of what you said there because I think I do kind of expect that sort of look from Hamilton and from this Chris Jones defense. But I think the way Toronto can control it is I do think they can run. I think if Hamilton is staying back, if they're going to try and umbrella that and keep Chad Kelly in front of them the whole time, then I do think you can run. I think Toronto's great at run blocking. I think they have the edge in the trenches. And I think this could be a really big game from Toronto on the ground. And so if they can get Kadeem Carey going early and really start, as Adeboboye starts getting back to full health as well, maybe you can rotate them in, get Deonta McMahon going. I think all three of those guys can factor in the run game and you can force Hamilton to maybe get out of that look. And now that's where you can take advantage of them deep downfield. The other thing I want to see them do, Hamilton's, we talked about this with Kenneth George ending up in Toronto. They've made a lot of changes in the secondary, and that secondary hasn't played well all season. It's been a weak spot for them. And now with them moving so many pieces around, releasing guys here and there, moving on from guys, moving guys' positions, I think you have to attack them in a way that requires them to communicate quickly. And so you're going to run concepts that travel through multiple zones. That's what's going to give Hamilton fits and issues. So it means deep dig routes. It means going from one side of the field to the other, your over routes, and test their communication. Test the communication from posts from the slot and slot fades and see how the DBs communicate with each other, because I think there are going to be some busts downfield. And Chad Kelly's pretty good usually at spotting those busts early. So that'd be the other thing I do. I think those are the two ways Toronto can attack. What's your defensive plan for the Argonauts, JB?
Well, oddly enough, Hamilton is an elite passing team.
Weirdly, yeah.
I mean, you and I joked the other day about who the Eastern offensive MVP was going to be, and is it not? Prove me wrong. Argue with me that it's not Bo Levi.
I will argue with you.
He is the best offensive weapon in the Eastern Conference.
It's not real though. It's he's playing well. I don't want to take that away from him, but
he does have a sort of Carson Palmer in Oakland feel to his statistics.
So how do you shut it down?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean now with Butler coming back again, they're not very good at running. I think that they're pretty good actually at protecting Bo Levi, and he is a veteran. They're pretty good at getting those deep plays. He is pretty good at picking his weapon of the night. Whether some nights Tim White is unstoppable, and then other nights they go to different guys. I think defensively, you want to get after him. I think that you definitely want to get pressure on him. I think that whether you need to bring an extra person in occasionally to get pressure on, I would definitely try to get pressure there. And then I think defensively, you're probably going to have to play a pass first defense again, because he wants to throw that bomb, but for me, I don't think they're expecting a blitz-heavy defense from Toronto. Toronto hasn't really shown that. I might surprise. I might come with that. I might see how that goes against Hamilton, because Hamilton has lost a lot of games, and they are often going to shoot themselves in the foot, and they're either going to fumble or they're going to, throw an interception. So I think you have a little freedom to play with experimenting with things. I would come out in that first quarter in Hamilton and bring as much heat as possible, and then let that Hamilton boo fire rage into a bonfire.
My one thing for this week is a pass play of 50 yards or more. I think that's a key. If you can show that and you can connect on one of those and make it count and not have something reviewed by replay and overturned, if you can hit one of those 50-yard bombs, I think that is going to completely unravel Hamilton's D, because it'll either force them to really back up, in which case my running plan I think will work well, or they'll stick with what they're doing and you can do it again and again and again. So I think hitting that one, especially if it's early, I think puts Hamilton away. So that's my one thing for this week. What is yours, JB?
My one thing is I would like to see 3 or more sacks.
Yeah.
I do think that crowd is going to be boisterous, inappropriate, energetic, and will turn on a dime if things do not go well. I think you do everything in your power to make that first quarter not go well, because this is not a crowd that is going to just say, no, just wait, it'll be better. This is a crowd that will turn their anger, I think, really quickly. So that, for me, that first quarter is huge. Let's throw the house at them. Different looks, different games at the line. Bring guys from the secondary, and then after that, I think once the crowd is out of it, it totally changes the game.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's totally the aggressive way to go is the correct one here. And I think it goes like that. I think for my prediction, I think Toronto wins this one 35-20, and I think a lot of those Hamilton points come late. I actually could see Toronto rolling away with this one in the first half, and then Hamilton fighting back late, which we've seen Hamilton do a few times, where some of those Bo Levi Mitchell yards come late in the game. This could be one of those contests. So Toronto puts a lot of points up in the first half. They kind of ride it to the finish line while Hamilton is scrapping away and trying to find something for their crowd to cheer about in that second half. So 35-20 is my score. How's this one finished for you, JB?
Mine's similar. I think Chad Kelly scored some touchdowns today in this game, and he starts to feel himself a little bit. I have Toronto 28 and Hamilton 25. So I think it's going to be close. I think Hamilton is going to be up for this game. I think the crowd's going to be up for this game. But I think the Chad Kelly offense should be enough to make the difference in what was a very close game last time.
It's time for Put Me Down for 20, and we are in a slump, JB. We've lost a combined 8 straight bets. Our golden fleeces are slipping through our fingers. I was at one point at 234. You were at 227. I'm now all the way down to 194. You're at 187. Nothing goes right. We're missing by like half a point here, half a point there. I missed by 5 yards on what would have been a lucrative Mackay Polk bet last week. But I'm going back to it this week. And so before we get into our bets, mind you, I want to remind you not to take any of our bets seriously. As you can tell by our record, you should not anyway. But even so, never bet any more than you're happy to lose as the price of entertainment. And certainly we're betting fictional golden fleeces. So if you make the decision to bet your hard-earned money, I would suggest listening to someone more intelligent than us, and certainly with someone with a better streak than we currently have going. So here are my 2 bets. I'm going back to the Mackay Polk well this week, this time with a touchdown. Mackay Polk touchdown is paying plus 190. So I'm going to put 10 golden fleeces on that for my Argos play. And my CFL play, I set my own point spread for the BC Lions. I think they are going to, I'm Ottawa. You can't do this to me again. I think BC is going to just unload on them at home against the Red Blacks. So I've set the point spread at 8.5, and that pays plus 230 for 10 golden fleeces. JB, what are your 2 wagers?
Well, I am staying far away from Ottawa.
It's good advice.
Forever if I can. Yeah, for me, I'm going to go with what I was saying. I think I like Chad Kelly to have a big game. I have him to score over 1.5 touchdowns at plus 112. So I have 10 fleeces on that. Because I think that he's going to throw 2 touchdowns. Um, and my second is I like Winnipeg to beat Saskatchewan. I know Winnipeg's on the road, but I really think they are the sleeping giant that has been awoken. And Winnipeg at plus 105 on the money line to win that game.
And finally, our CFL picks. It was 3-1 for me last week. Of course, the one I got wrong is Ottawa, which is that's a weekly tradition now. I'm going to go back. I think it's time, JB. We should go back. We did this last year, and around this stage of the season, and look at which teams we were good at picking, which we were terrible at. I know I'm good at picking Toronto games, and I'm terrible at picking Ottawa. I just don't know how terrible. So I would like to see that number. Maybe I don't want to see that number. I have a feeling I may be 0-10-1 against Ottawa, but I don't know for sure. So let's get into this week's picks. You were 2-2 last week. You had Toronto and Winnipeg, but you picked BC and Edmonton, and neither of those two worked out. So week 13.
Just my little venture. I cannot believe Edmonton did not win that game. I mean, I can believe it, but also I can't.
Yeah, and that's not the first time you've said that.
No, it's not. I know. I watched them and I was like, how is this not happening? Anyways.
Games are Saturday, Sunday, Monday this week. No Thursday night football, no Friday night football. It's kind of weird. Ottawa at BC opens play. I am going with the BC Lions. Who are you taking, JB?
Yeah, I'm taking BC. I mean, I know Ottawa. I mean, look, if Ottawa wins this game, then I keep making these pronouncements, but
I know.
I don't know. I don't know what to question. I don't know. I don't know. What laws
I don't
of nature.
see it. I don't like. We've been watching football for a long time, and we do make a lot of mistakes. We do, and there's stuff we don't see. I have so much trouble believing the Ottawa Redblacks to be as good a team as their record. I really don't see it. I'm not saying they're a terrible team. I'm not saying they're the worst in the league, but I have no idea how they have 7 wins. It just doesn't. They don't look like that kind of team to me. And so, maybe I'm just wrong, and I'm going to continue to be wrong all season long, or maybe they start coming back to earth at some point. Winnipeg at Saskatchewan. This is always a fun one. This was a great game last year too. This was the Jake Dolegala game where he came out and beat the Blue Bombers, and it was pretty epic. And then things went sideways in the Banjo Bowl. But I have Saskatchewan winning at home. I think the crowd is going to be electric. It's sold out. They always that's a tough place to play, and so I'm going to go with the Rough Riders in that sellout crowd. Where are you going, JB?
Yeah, I'm all Winnipeg, all the time. I think that they are going to the Grey Cup, and I think they are a problem, and I think they win this game.
I thought for sure you were going to hedge that one. And then Toronto at Hamilton. I've got Toronto. Are you sticking with the Argos for this one?
I am. I think it's going to be close. I think it depending on that first quarter. I think it's going to be really close, but I like Toronto coming out on top.
And then Edmonton at Calgary. I've got Edmonton. I think they're the better football team. Calgary's another team I'm not great at picking, though, so we'll have to see. Who do you have, Elks or Stamps?
Oh, God. I don't even want to. Just looking at this game, I just despair at having to pick one of these two teams. I mean, I just can't in good conscience take Edmonton twice in a row after having to watch that last week. So I will take Calgary under protest.
Under protest. All right. I don't know if I get that, but fair enough. Well, that will just about do it for us on this Labor Day special pregame walkthrough podcast. And it's Monday, all right? That's the next Argos game. It's Monday at 2:30 kickoff Eastern Time. Toronto Argonauts at Hamilton Tiger Cats for the Labor Day Classic. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
together fight the foe, foe, foe.